Hare Krishna, devotees. Welcome to day 31 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto. Yes, so today's day 31 and we are in the 11th chapter of the third canto. 11th chapter is titled Calculation of Time from the Atom. It's a deep subject. It's a very deep subject. And right, we are in the second section, which is called Divisions of Time. And we're going to carry on from verse 14. However, before we do that, let us recite our prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Jatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchikalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Right, okay, so we're in the second section from verse 3 to verse 15. We're right at the end of that section. It's the section's titled Divisions of Time. And we're going to continue on from verse 14. So the thing is that different divisions of time have been discussed here in this section. Beginning, of course, the beginning was the time that the sun takes to cross one atom. Atom being the smallest possible piece, you could say indivisible piece of matter. So that's called atomic time. And then there are all sorts of other divisions. 2 atoms, 3 atoms, 6 atoms. Yeah, the amount of, how long the sun takes to cross that number of atoms and so on, and there's more. And so now here we find a summary, particularly in the purport of verse 14 of chapter 11. Right. So let's get into it. Verse 14. There are 5 different names for the orbits of the sun, moon, stars, and luminaries in the firmament. And they each have their own samvatsara. Now that's interesting. A samvatsara. What's a samvatsara? That's described where is it? Oh, well, anyway, maybe you'll have to look it up and see. A samvatsara. It's a particular unit of time. Each have their own samvatsara. Oh, yeah. So it's mentioned actually in the purport of verse 13. that from the sun down to the atom, all bodies are under the influence of the Kala chakra meaning the orbit of eternal time. And each of them has a scheduled orbital time of one samvatsara. And this verse here we just read now, verse 14, is making the point that sun, moon, stars, luminaries in the firmament normally means the skies, or they would normally in a romantic sense say the heavens. So each of them has their own samvatsara. So samvatsaras, in other words, are unique to the particular object being referred to or being described. Right, so anyway, let's have a look here at the purport of verse 14. It is important. Prabhupada, first of all, makes the point that subjects of physics, chemistry, etc. are dealt with in the above verses, these verses we've been reading about time in relation, different periods of time. And of course it's interesting, it's very interesting. Although to explain it all very thoroughly from the technical point of view, well, that's another thing, that's very difficult. So Prabhupada says that the subject is summarized by stating that all the above types of knowledge, physics, chemistry, etc., they're all under, that above all types of knowledge is the control of Kala, time, which is the plenary representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada makes the interesting point, everything, no matter how wonderful to our small brains, is just the work of his wand. That's a nice way of putting it, isn't it? The Lord as the supreme magician using his wand, and everything is working in each thing in its own unique way. So now then Prabhupada gives a list of timings, the timings, or many of, maybe all of, but at least many of, the timings that we read about yesterday particularly. There were different periods of time, each with their own name, and now the idea is to understand in our modern terminologies of seconds, fractions of seconds, minutes, hours, days, etc., how those divisions of time can be understood in our terminologies. How many seconds is a this, and how many minutes is a that? So here we go. So first of all, there is one Truti. A Truti was mentioned, and that is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of 1 second, so tiny that certainly our brains cannot capture it. But in our terminology, it is 13,500ths of 1 second. So, what is that? That's a very short period of time indeed. The point is, if you take a second and you divide it into 13,500 parts, then 8 of those is 1 Truti. Then next up is 1 Vaidha. That was, we mentioned yesterday. one Vaibhava translates in our terminologies to 8 135ths of a second. In other words, if you divide 1 second into 135 parts, that means that not like a truity, it's just totally infinitesimal. This is also very tiny fraction of a second. If you divide a second into 135 parts, one Vaibhava is 8 of them. Then a term we have heard before. We've heard of a lava, L-A-V-A, lava. What does the verse say? Lord Chaitanya says, Sadhu Sangha Sarva Shastri Koi Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha Sarva Siddhi Hoy. The idea is the association of devotees. Through that association you get perfection, and even if it's just one lava of association, you can still get perfection. So what's a lava? It is 8/45ths of a second. You divide a second into 45 parts. One lava is 8 of them. So, it is sort of, not exactly, but roughly 1/5 or 1/6. It's actually closer to 1/6 of 1 second. Now, if it was 8/48, that would be 1/6 of a second. But it's 8/45, so, it's pretty close. Then next is 1 nimesha. 1 nimesha is 8/15ths of a second. Means fractionally more than half a second. If it was 8/16ths of a second, it would actually be half a second, but it's 8/15ths. Then there's 1 kshana, and it is 8/5ths of a second. It means it's more than a second. It's 1 3/5ths of a second. A little more than 1.5 seconds is 1 kshana. Next is 1 kashta, is 8 seconds. Then 1 lagu is about 2 minutes. Then 1 danda is 30 minutes. 1 prahara is 3 hours. Then in the classical Vedic sense, 1 day is 12 hours. Means the sunlit part. Yeah. We are used to referring to 1 day as being 24 hours, day and night. But classically, in Vedic terminologies, 1 day is 12 hours. And that's why we say a day of Brahma. That's the time that the creation exists for, at least the sort of the lower, middle, and a little bit upper planetary systems. They exist for 1 day of Brahma. Yeah. So 1 day is 12 hours, and then 1 night is 12 hours. And then 1 paksha is 15 days, more or less 2 weeks. Then 2 pakshas is 1 month. 12 months is 1 year, or 1 full orbit of the sun. And humans, if they're living under normal or proper human conditions, they should live 100 years. Of course, nowadays they're not living under proper human conditions, so they don't, at least it's rare. And so this is the way. This is the way of understanding how time is working. And Prabhupada then quotes Brahma Samhita, chapter 52, which is affirming this about the Kala Chakra. Right, so on we go to verse 15. O Vidura, the sun enlivens all living entities with his unlimited heat and light. He diminishes the duration of life of all living entities in order to release them from their illusion of material attachment. And he enlarges the path of elevation to the heavenly kingdom. He thus moves in the firmament with great velocity, and therefore everyone should offer him respects once every 5 years with all ingredients of worship. That's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, that's not something Prabhupada had us do, so. But it's interesting. It's very interesting. The sun plays such a major part in life within the universe. In fact, there's not exactly a saying, but there's definitely an idea. If someone is old and diseased and, the body, it's just really so difficult. Or even if someone is not necessarily old, but their body is just about finished, then as a last resort, you tried all the doctors and, maybe some alternative approaches to help the person regain their health, but they're not regaining their health at all. Rather, it looks like the end is coming. Then what do they say? They say, just put him in the sun. Just put him in the sun as a last resort, because the sun is such an embodiment of life, of vitality. Okay, so on we go, devotees. The next section, 3, is verses 16 and 17. And we call this Vidura asks about durations of life. Okay, so there's just the 2 verses, 16 and 17. Let us just read through them with their purports from the outset. Okay, so verse 16. Vidura said, I now understand the life durations of the residents of the Pita planets and heavenly planets, as well as that of the human beings. Now kindly inform me of the durations of life of those greatly learned living entities who are beyond the range of a kalpa. Right, so beyond the range of a kalpa, basically the kalpa is a day of Brahma. And as we just said, there's a partial annihilation. Anyway, Prabhupada discusses it in the purport here. Let's just have a look at the purport. So the thing is that the partial annihilation at the end of Brahma's day does not affect all the planetary systems. Tapaloka, Janaloka, and Siddhaloka, is it, I think? They're not affected They remain. And the people living there, they just carry on. Whereas people like us, we're in the middle planetary systems, we're all destroyed, along with our planets, at the end of Brahma's day. But Prabhupada goes on to say that the planets of sages like Bhrigu Muni, Sanaka, the four Kumars, they're not affected by the annihilations of the kalpas or of the days of Brahma. So this is what Vidura is asking about. Tell me about the durations of life of those great persons, because they're generally great sages and highly enlightened people in very great knowledge, and their planets don't get destroyed and they don't die when it's the end of a day of Brahma. So Prabhupada makes the point that all planets, whatever planet, any planet, including those planets, all planets of different types, they're all of different types, and each type is controlled by a different Kala chakra or a different schedule of eternal time. Of course, the most vivid example is Lord Brahma himself, who lives for 100 years, 100 of his years, although by our experience it's 311 trillion, 40 billion of our years. So it's a different Kala chakra, wheel of time, or schedule of eternal time. So the Earth's time is not the same as other planets. And Vidura is asking about the durations of life on those other planets. Right, so verse 17, O spiritually powerful one, is addressing Maitreya, you can understand the movements of eternal time, which is the controlling form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because you are a self-realized person, you can see everything by the power of mystic vision. Okay. So in the purport here, Srila Prabhupada makes the point that the great mystics, they can see past, present, and future. Therefore, they're called Tri-Kala Gyas. Tri meaning three, Kala meaning time, times, Gyas, people who know. Yeah, they know three types of time. Means past times, present times, future times. So that's for the mystic yogis. The devotees, though, they're not necessarily like that. In fact, generally they're not like that, seeing past, present, and future in material life. But because they understand Shastra very clearly, so they can understand what is going on in terms of time. Yeah. Without necessarily knowing past, present, and future. But, for example, they can know if they see how a person is acting now, then they can understand what position that person's going to be in the future. And, it's described, actually, if I remember correctly, it's in the 4th canto, Narada Muni, there's a description, we'll see when we get there, that he has such vision that he just looks at the type of body you're in now, and he can understand what you did in the past, by which you got this particular body. So that's a type at least of Trikalagya. But it's based on Shastra. And devotees are like that. So therefore they understand the science of Krishna and Krishna consciousness, and they understand very clearly situations in the material world and in the spiritual world. No difficulty at all. So they don't have to try for any yoga siddhi, some mystical perfection. Just through knowledge of Shastra, at least if they're advanced enough in knowledge of Shastra, they can essentially understand all these things. And whatever they need to understand, they understand by Krishna's grace. Krishna gives the devotees the understandings they need to serve him and to live nicely in Krishna consciousness. Right, so on to the next section. Section 4 is from verse 18 to verse 27. Maitreya explains the durations of millennia, etc. Etc. Yeah. Different ages, different periods of time, universal periods of time, how long they are in our terms. Right, so, okay, verse 18. Now we're going to have to read all the verses and then come back and do them with the purports. So Maitreya said, O Vidura, the 4 millenniums are called the Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali yugas. The aggregate number of years of all of these combined is equal to 12,000 years of the demigods. 19. The duration of the Satya millennium equals 4,800 years of the years of the demigods. The duration of the Treta millennium equals 3,600 years of the demigods. The duration of the Dwapara millennium equals 2,400 years of the demigods, and that of the Kali millennium is 1,200 years of the demigods. Verse 20, the transitional periods before and after every millennium, which are a few hundred years as aforementioned, are known as yuga sandhyas, or the conjunctions of 2 millenniums, 2 yugas, according to the expert astronomers. In those periods, all kinds of religious activities are performed. Verse 21, O Vidura, in the Satya millennium, mankind properly and completely maintained the principles of religion. But in other millenniums, religion gradually decreased by 1 part, as irreligion was proportionately admitted. Yes, 1 part out of 4. So we see that Satya Yuga is so many years. The next Yuga, Treta Yuga, is 1/4 less. Then the Dwapara Yuga is 1/4 of the total, 1/4 of the total of the 4 yugas. It's 1/4 less, and similarly the Kali Yuga is 1/4 of the total number of years of the 4 yugas, 1/4 less. Okay. 22. Outside of the 3 planetary systems, Swarga, Marcha, and Patala, the 4 yugas multiplied by 1,000 comprise 1 day on the planet of Brahma. A similar period comprises a night of Brahma, in which the creator of the universe goes to sleep. Right, verse 23. After the end of Brahma's night, the creation of the three worlds begins again in the daytime of Brahma, and they continue to exist through the life durations of 14 consecutive Manus, or fathers of mankind. 24. Each and every Manu enjoys a life of a little more than 71 sets of 4 millenniums, of the 4 yugas. 25. After the dissolution of each and every Manu, the next Manu comes in order, along with his descendants, who rule over the different planets. But the 7 famous sages and demigods like Indra and their followers, such as the Gandharvas, all appear simultaneously with Manu. 26. In the creation, during Brahma's day, the 3 planetary systems, Swarga, Martya, and Patala, revolve, and the inhabitants, including the lower animals, human beings, demigods, and pitas, appear and disappear in terms of their fruitive activities. 27. In each and every change of Manu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears by manifesting his internal potency in different incarnations, as Manu and others. Thus, he maintains the universe by discovered power. Right, devotees. So let's go through this. So this is section 4, verse 18 to verse 27. And subject matter is, well, as we saw, Maitreya explains the durations of millennia, etc., different particular periods of time. Right. Okay, so verse 18 again, and it's got a purport, short purport. Maitreya said, O Vidura, the 4 millenniums are called the Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali Yugas. The aggregate number of years of all of these combined is equal to 12,000 years of the demigods. So now, Srila Prabhupada in the purport, first point is very important, at least for us to be able to relate to everything, that 1 year of the demigods is 360 of our human years. Therefore, 12,000 demigod years, including the Yuga Sandhya transitional period in between the different yugas, there's a little period of time in between. So, therefore, those 12,000 demigod years make up the time of 4 yugas. Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, put them together, you got 12,000 years of the demigods. Yes, that's one cycle of the 4 yugas. So therefore, in our terms, the cycle of 4 yugas, Satya, then Treta, then Dwapara, then Kali, put them all together, the 4 of them, and there's a little break in between called a Yuga Sandhya. And in our terms, one cycle of those 4 yugas is 4,329,000 years. Means, devotees, 12,000 multiplied by 360 equals 4,320,000 years, excuse me. 4,320,000 years. 4 million. That's it. That's it. We got it. Right, okay, verse 19. The duration of the Satya millennium equals 4,800 years of the demigods. The duration of the Treta millennium equals 3,600. You see, it's 1/4 less. 4,800, what's a quarter of that? 1,200. So you take 1,200 from 4,800, you're left with 3,600. That's the length of the Treta millennium in years of the demigods, at least. Then the duration of the Dwapara Yuga is take away another 1,200. You're left with 2,400 years and of the demigods. And then the Kali Yuga, take another 1,200 away, is 1,200, 1,200 years of the demigods. So in our years then, Satya Yuga is 4,800 times 360, 1,728,000 years. Treta Yuga is 3,600 times 360, is 1,296,000 years. Dwapara Yuga is 2,400 times 360, means 864,000 years. And Kali Yuga is 1,200 times 360, or 432,000 years. And Lord Krishna, Kali Yuga, Lord Krishna left this world plus or minus 5,000 years ago. It means there's still 427,000 years to go in Kali Yuga. It's not a short time. Sometimes people, in fact, someone asked me, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago, but maybe 3 weeks ago, a very nice person, new to Krishna consciousness, said, I have heard that Kali has already appeared. And someone else said, he's going to appear very soon. Well, sorry, in approximately 427,000 more years, Kalki, not Kali, Kalki will appear. Yeah, Kalki will appear. Because there's only 5,000 years have passed, totals 432,000, means 427,000 years to go. And right at the end of that, Kalki appears. Right, okay, verse 20. The transitional periods before and after every millennium, which are a few hundred years as aforementioned, are known as Yuga Sandhyas, or the conjunctions of 2 millenniums, according to expert astronomers. In those periods, all kinds of religious activities are performed. Yeah, so in between, from Satya Yuga to Treta Yuga, there's this bridging period, a Yuga Sandhya. Then from Treta to Dwapara, again, there's this bridging period, a few hundred years. Then from Dwapara to Kali, same thing, there's a bridging period. And the technical term is Yuga Sandhya. Sandhya, basically Sandhya means meeting time. Like Sandhya, another form of the term is Sandhi. Sandhi. When night meets morning, that's a Sandhi. When morning meets afternoon, means middle of the day, that's a Sandhi. And when afternoon meets night, it's another Sandhi. These are the three Sandhis in the last verse of that we sing, at least, of the Gauravastakam. Jyayam stuvams tasya yashas tri sandhyam. We must remember the spiritual master, tri sandhyam, at three sandhis. Means chant Gayatri when night meets morning, then morning meets afternoon, then afternoon meets night. We must chant Gayatri. So Yuga Sandhya. And in Sanskrit grammar, when words meet and the letters at the end and or the beginning, the end of the first word, and the beginning of the second word, when the first and second word meet, then oftentimes the letters at the end and the beginning of the words, they change. That's called rules of Sandhi in Sanskrit grammar, the rules of meeting, when words meet, when the end of one word meets with the beginning of another word. Verse 21, O Vidura, in the Satya millennium, mankind properly and completely maintained the principles of religion. But in other millenniums, religion gradually decreased by one part, as irreligion was proportionately admitted. Yes. Well, let's look at the purport. In Satya Yuga, the verse mentions, and Prabhupada mentions, everyone was completely religious. But then in Treta Yuga, the standard of religion had decreased by 1/4, one part. So then when Dwapara Yuga came, then it decreased by another part, so you're down to half. One part is 1/4. Then when Kali Yuga came, you're down to 1/4, because 3/4 have been lost. So we know there are the principles of religion, standards of religion, cleanliness, mercy, austerity, and truthfulness. By the time Kali Yuga comes, and it already came sometime before, but by the time it comes, mercy, austerity, cleanliness, they've already more or less gone. And there's just some truthfulness left. And now, of course, we know that truthfulness is severely under attack. Oh, so much cheating. 22. Outside of the 3 planetary systems, Swarga, Marcha, and Patala, the 4 yugas multiplied by 1,000 comprise one day on the planet of Brahma. A similar period comprises a night of Brahma, in which the creator of the universe goes to sleep. So, yes, we mentioned that when Brahma sleeps at night, 3 planetary systems beneath Brahmaloka are submerged in the waters of devastation. That means Patala, lowest, Martya, middle, and Swarga means sort of lower, higher planets. And Tapaloka, Janaloka, and I think it's Siddhaloka remain. Right, so while sleeping, Brahma dreams of Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Wow, talk about a good dream. Who instructs him how to rehabilitate the devastated part of the universe when he wakes up again. So when Brahma wakes up again, he's full of ideas, not just ideas, but understandings of how to put things back together again in the part of the universe that got destroyed. So, right, 23. At the end of Brahma's night, the creation of the three worlds begins again in the daytime of Brahma, and they continue to exist through the life durations of 14 consecutive manus, or fathers of mankind. So these three worlds are created again at the end of Brahma's night, and then during the day they continue to exist during the life durations of 14 manus. Yeah. And Prabhupada makes the point, interesting and important, that at the end of the life of each manu, there are like mini dissolutions, shorter dissolutions. Yes. There's no details on the extent of the dissolutions, what gets destroyed and what doesn't, but some shorter dissolutions are there. 14 times at the end of each manu's life during the course of a day of Brahma. 24. Each and every manu enjoys a life of a little more than 71 sets of 4 millenniums. And Prabhupada makes the point that this is confirmed also by Vishnu Purana. So one manu's life is 852,000 years of the demigods. 306,720,000 human years. 25. After the dissolution of each and every manu, the next manu comes in order along with his descendants who rule over the different planets. But the 7 famous sages and demigods like Indra and their followers, such as the Gandharvas, all appear simultaneously with Manu, each Manu. There's a new Indra with his associates, the main administrative demigods. Every Manu, there's a new Indra, along with his other demigod associates. And Prabhupada makes the point in the purport, there are 14 Manus in one day of Brahma, as we already noted, and each of them has different descendants, family members, associates, etc. 26. In the creation, during Brahma's day, the 3 planetary systems, Swarga, Marcha, and Patala, revolve, and the inhabitants, including the lower animals, human beings, demigods, and pitas, appear and disappear in terms of their fruitive activity. And then finally, verse 27, in each and every change of Manu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead appears by manifesting his internal potency in different incarnations, as Manu and others. Thus he maintains the universe by discovered power. Okay, devotees, so what we do now, we go on to the 5th section, which is divisions in Brahma's lifetime, verse 28 to verse 39, and at this stage we'll just read the the translations of the verses themselves. So here we go, verse 28. At the end of the day, under the insignificant portion of the mode of darkness, the powerful manifestation of the universe merges in the darkness of night. By the influence of eternal time, the innumerable living entities remain merged in that dissolution, and everything is silent. 29. When the night of Brahma ensues, all the three worlds are out of sight, and the sun and the moon are without glare, just as in the due course of an ordinary night. Verse 30. The devastation takes place due to the fire emanating from the mouth of Sankarshan, and thus great sages like Bhrigu and other inhabitants of Mahaloka transport themselves to Janaloka, being distressed by the warmth of the blazing fire, which rages through the three worlds below. Verse 31. At the beginning of the devastation, all the seas overflow, and hurricane winds blow very violently. Thus the waves of the seas become ferocious, and in no time at all the three worlds are full of water. 32. The Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, lies down in the water on the seat of Ananta with his eyes closed, and the inhabitants of the Janaloka planets offer their glorious prayers unto the Lord with folded hands. Verse 33. Thus the process of the exhaustion of the duration of life exists for every one of the living beings, including Lord Brahma. One's life endures for only 100 years in terms of the times in the different planets. 34. The 100 years of Brahma's life are divided into two parts, the first half and the second half. The first half of the duration of Brahma's life is already over, and the second half is now current. Verse 35. In the beginning of the first half of Brahma's life, there was a millennium called Brahmakalpa, wherein Lord Brahma appeared. The birth of the Vedas was simultaneous with Brahma's birth. Verse 36. The millennium which followed the first Brahma millennium is known as the Padmakalpa, because in that millennium the universal lotus flower grew out of the navel reservoir of water of the personality of Godhead, Hari. Verse 37. O descendant of Bharata, the first millennium in the second half of the life of Brahma is also known as the Varaha millennium, because the personality of Godhead appeared in that millennium as the hog incarnation. 38. The duration of the two parts of Brahma's life, as above mentioned, is calculated to be equal to 1 nimesha, less than a second, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is unchanging and unlimited, and is the cause of all causes of the universe. And verse 39, the last verse in this section, eternal time is certainly the controller of different dimensions, from that of the atom up to the super divisions of the duration of Brahma's life. But, nevertheless, it is controlled by the Supreme. Time can control only those who are body conscious, even up to the Satyaloka or the other higher planets of the universe. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.